I'm Maureen Yoder from Leicester University. I've worked there for 33 years, and before that I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher, and then middle school computer specialist, and then a high school teacher, and then undergrad and graduate, and now, so my students just kept getting taller. But there's some concepts that I've used whether I taught kindergarten or graduate students, and I think you'll see that throughout this. So, this is sort of like a quick trip through a buffet where you see what you want and then you go back and fill your plate with what you really liked. You'll get all the links later. I'm going to go really fast because I have a lot to show you, but I'm putting it all on SlideShare, okay? And you'll be able to get all the links afterwards. So don't worry about taking notes or any of that. Okay, it's also sort of like one of those bus trips, those Gray Line bus trips where you see the whole city and you decide what you're going to spend time on later. Some of the information I've gleaned from two places. One, Gartner is a person and a firm that predicts the technology trends, and they've been doing this for 8 years now. Many of them relate to business, but I like to think that our students eventually are going to be in the big wide business world. So I look at some of their trends and see what the implications are for education, and that's what I did. So this is their group. This was just published the very end of 2014. You'll see me refer to it throughout the presentation because some of these are very relevant to what's happening in education today. Some of the terms I wasn't that familiar with, and I didn't quite understand what they were, like the Internet of Things. So I'll refer to that a little bit. The other is, just a couple weeks ago, there was the great big Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Some people said, why don't you go there? You know, you teach a course in emerging technologies. Well, I'm not going to bother going there, but the videos from that conference are fantastic because all these people, publishers and bloggers and all those people will say, they'll create their blog posting and they'll say, you know, the 10 best ideas from CES or the 20 best video, you know. So you get a really nice overview if you just spend a lot of time. And I just put one of those there, the must-see videos. But there are 50 people who have their own version of the must-see videos. Anyway, so a lot of the information and the articles and the products I've updated because they had new announcements at this show. So I say fasten your seatbelts because here we go. As I said, I'm going to go really, really fast. 25 ideas and technologies. So I'm going to go through 25 down to 1, but there isn't any particular order. I don't think that 25 is less important than 1 or anything like that. It's just the way I count. Backwards. Okay, so computing everywhere, that's one of the terms that Gartner uses. And Carly Schuler is an author, and she did a great big study. I love the Sesame Street people. I think they're very creative and were very innovative and started Sesame Street years and years ago when it was a really innovative program using color and light and movement and all that. So she talks about computing everywhere and why learning cannot just be confined to classroom activities and how teachers and students have this 24/7 access to information. So I have the link to this. This is a really nice article to read about this. So the first technology I'm going to talk about is drones. Now, you've heard of drones, and even Amazon announced that they may even have packages delivered by these drones on your doorstep, which is pretty remarkable. And there are a lot of articles about why Google and Amazon and all these places are thinking of these things. And one of the things they talk about is their company having very childlike, imaginative people. And I think that's important because we teach young students and we want them to be open-minded and innovative and curious. There were drones all over the place at the Consumer Electronics Show, and you could see them if you saw videos. They're hovering all over people's heads and they're crashing into things, and it was kind of interesting and kind of fun. But there were a few articles. This one was just published January 1st, right before the show, actually, and it's about this company, Robo Labs, and they really believe that STEM teaching is going to be successful if you incorporate robots and 3D printers and all of this. And they actually write about drones and how it isn't so much the thing flying around that's important. It's the planning, it's the programming, it's the problem solving that goes into making them fly. This was an article, and I love this picture. I think some adult wrote that. But anyway, I remember even as a kid, you know, flying machines and looking at the Jetsons and all of that. And we thought of flying machines, not just planes, but self-propelled things you could attach to yourself and stuff like that. So this article is from Connect Learning Today. And I really love it because it talks about imagination and how these people, as I said, at Google and Amazon, all those places, are supposed to be what they call kid thinkers. And thinking about what is possible without worrying about logistics and money and things like that. They just are paid to imagine, which is fantastic. And many of their projects come to fruition. It also talks about brainstorming and how important that is. That as a STEM teacher, you need to have some brainstorming. You probably are already doing it. But they talk about how important that is. When there's no right or wrong, kids can just throw out ideas and imagine how important that is. And they end the article by saying, think of all the ideas you can generate when minds are trained to be unleashed. So I know from teaching little kids and then older kids, the little kids are the ones who can imagine so beautifully. And I know it was my job as an early childhood teacher to not squelch that. The Internet of Things, that's another one of Gartner's important features in his report. And I wasn't sure what that was, and I've seen a lot of different definitions, but this one I kind of liked, a system in which objects can communicate internally or with other machines, which I think has been around a long time. But this one article talked about the implications of the Internet of Things for education in classrooms. One of the things Robert Lutz talked about was the help for special needs students, how it's so important to customize what you're doing so that a special needs child can feel independent and successful. The second was the increased efficiency, and that a lot of that has to do with administrative functions and how efficient they should be. School security is another one, and that's been in the news a lot because of the unfortunate incidents of lack of security and shootings and all that. And then mobile learning, how important it is to have this full-time, 24/7 access, fast internet, and the ability to share everything digitally, paperless and all of that. I wanted to include this one because I wasn't sure what the great inflection was. Thomas Friedman has written quite a bit. You've probably read some of his. And I think he's a wonderful, forward-thinking thinker. And I was attracted to this part of what he was writing because it had to do, his bottom line was about kids. And he talks about all of this diffusion of low-cost, high-powered, innovative technologies and how cheap connectivity is getting. he talks about the passion quotient and the curiosity quotient, and how important both of those are together. He talks about these skills that he calls them new skills, but in a way that they hadn't seen before, and how important it is to have entrepreneurship and all of that for startups and innovation, and how important it is to have individual risk-taking, that we allow our kids to make mistakes and learn from them. The keynote and a few other people today were talking about that, how we have to have kids who aren't afraid to make mistakes and learn from them. But this is what he says at the end of the article, which I love. Give me the kid with a passion to learn and a curiosity to discover, and I'll take him or her over the less passionate kid with a huge IQ every day of the week. And I think that really speaks to us as teachers, how important it is for us to foster that. Another technology, bunch of technologies really, but I chose three that I think are pretty fascinating. One is the silent laser keyboard. I've tried to use one of these things without a lot of success, but I still think it's fascinating that you can actually project a keyboard and touch it and make it work. Another is a solar power keyboard, which could be useful some of the time if you don't want to bother with batteries or any of that. But this one I think is fascinating. This is the True Grip handheld keyboard, and it's a whole different kind of keyboard that is really good for people good with their thumbs. I am not. My teenagers are. So I think for some people, this kind of thumb stuff, the input, this could be very exciting. And I had heard about it before the Consumer Electronics Show, but it was featured there, and there's a click to an article about it, because the company, sometimes I look at things and 6 months later the company doesn't exist. Other times I'll look at something and 6 months later all of a sudden they have a booth at a conference and they're doing really well. This I included just because I'm a real fan of Daniel Pink and his writing, and I love what he says about this. We need to prepare kids for their future, not our past. And I know that's something we need to keep in mind, because we're not preparing our kids for the lives that we're familiar with, but with theirs. And this is just, I call this comic relief. These are just two cartoons that kind of spoke to me. This one says, I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. And I've seen classrooms like that where the teacher kind of means well, but they're using completely traditional approaches, just like I'm using right now lecturing to you. I would much rather have you all in different groups and doing things. This one too, I channeled John Dewey. He says if you want to be a good teacher, don't teach reading and writing, teach students. And of course we always have to remember that too. I just thought that was good. Okay, back to, this is a trend too. At some conferences I've been at, while the keynote speaker is talking, there's a screen and somebody live is sketchnoting the notes about the presentation. Have you ever seen that? It's fascinating, and it's a whole different way of looking at something that I love because I'm very visual. This is for doodlers. All of a sudden, doodling is become mainstream, and it's focused on in many places. So this is just one example. And I thought it had to be done by some very clever, artistic person. But what's really neat is that they have these applications now, and you can do your own sketchnoting with all little icons that you can use. This is called the Worldwide Community of Sketchnoters, and you can see a whole collection of really neat ones there. Also, some of the TED Talks and some of the other talks are being documented with these sketch notes, and you can see them online. So this is just you can click there and you see a whole collection of them. This is called Image Think, and this is a company. It's called Picturing Your Big Ideas. And again, this is sketchnoting, and it's not linear, it's very visual, and I think it's very attractive, and it just is a different way of looking at something. But you could do your own. I call this do-it-yourself sketchnoting. One of the applications is iPad Art Room, and this is for iPads, visual thinking note-taking apps. Kathy Schrock, who speaks at this conference every year, she has a wonderful site, and she has a section on sketchnoting, and it has a whole bunch of nice little places you can click on to learn more about it. So I want to move on to the maker movement, and I have 4 different sections of this because I think this is really an important move. It's kind of back to basics in a way. I mean, I've seen more people knitting now. Knitting is picking up, a lot of popularity. But the whole idea is that these are what they call engineering-oriented pursuits. It isn't, a lot of it is whatever you can make by yourself, arts and crafts, but there's also a lot of electronics and robotics and 3D printing and all of that. So I want to look at that and how you can get involved. So part of the maker movement is, instead of being isolated, you can be in a face-to-face locale with lots of other people making things. It's very social, it's collaborative, there are clubs, it's family-oriented, all different ages, all different kinds of interests. Some of them are arts and crafts, but a lot of them involve electronics and engineering. So these are just some of the quotes if you wanted to justify what you were doing. I always like to have a few articles from important sounding people. And this is from the National Science Foundation. And they're very happy because engineering, all of a sudden, he says, is enjoying a moment. Because of the maker movement, there's a real phenomenon now that everyday citizens, that's you and I, can design things and build things and create things. It also goes way back to the whole constructivist movement that I used to talk about quite a bit, that if you make things, if you do things, if you create something new and based on your skills, that it's a better learning experience. In 1995, Bernie Dodge in California started WebQuests. You remember those? Well, people aren't using the word WebQuest as much anymore, but the concept is still alive. And the whole idea behind a WebQuest was that you didn't just learn information. You learned information and then you did something with it. You created something. And it didn't have to be on the computer. It could have been a garden or a mural. But you were taking information, transforming it into something else original, and that was the whole idea behind it. So the maker movement is kind of like that. Mark Hatch is somebody who is a real cheerleader for the maker movement, and he believes it's just fundamental. It's part of being human, and I love reading his stuff because it just gives you a real feeling for how important this is. And this, remember we talked about image think and sketch noting. Well, this is his manifesto, and it isn't just a plain piece of paper with text. His manifesto is a sketchnoting document. And if you just take the words out of that, making, share, give, learn, tool, play, participate, support, change, I mean, those are all good things, and it's all incorporated into this kind of movement. Here's another article about design and manufacturing and the whole idea that this is important to the learning process. And this one I kind of like. This is from Scholastic. Why should you care about the maker movement? And this is by the co-author of Invent to Learn, which I'll talk about in a minute, and why you could and maybe should start a maker movement in your school and why it's such a powerful way for kids to learn. So the two authors are Sylvia Martinez and Gary Steger, and he has spoken here and he speaks at ISTE, and he's written quite a bit about this, and he's very, very passionate. I would go to Gary Steger's website and see some of the videos he has, and the videos of children who are real leaders in this movement. His book, their book, Invent to Learn, is really, it's almost considered, some people call it the Bible of the maker movement, and it's called Making, Tinkering, and Engineering in the Classroom. It's all based on really good educational theory and all that. And there's Gary, and he says, the real revolution may not be the 3D printer as much as it is the democratization of design in the Z-axis. So this is something everybody can be involved in. This is just something I saw that I thought was kind of fun. The electric giraffe goes to Washington. Well, President Obama actually invited the man who created this 18-foot robot. And there it is. It's a ton, 18 feet tall. Can you imagine getting it there? And it was just a great project. And Obama actually is very interested in the maker movement. It is mentioned it in a couple of his speeches. Maker Faire. In addition to the concept of doing this in your classroom, there are actually maker fairs around the country, around the world. And it's kind of, as they say, part science fair, part county fair, part something entirely new. And it's for all ages. There is usually a fee, but it's not very much. And it's a gathering of people who like arts and crafts or electronics. It's teachers, engineers, families, and they're around the country. You can go to makerfair.com and you can see, I'll show you what the schedule looks like. It's brought to you by Maker Media, and that's a company that publishes a magazine. They produce, they have things they sell for the movement. They do an awful lot. They have books, they have videos online, things like that. And they're starting these stores, which I'll talk about in a minute. So if you go to their website, you can see where there are fairs around the world, and you can find one near you. They're usually in the bigger cities, but not necessarily. Sometimes one of them came to Nashua, New Hampshire, you know, the New Hampshire area recently, not a real big city, but they have them in New York and San Francisco and other places. But another trend that I think is wonderful is they have these storefronts now. And you can go there individually or bring your family, and you can make things right there. It's a little hard to search for them because they have unusual names. This one is called the Artisans Asylum, and it's in Somerville, Massachusetts, not far from where I work. That's one of them. And you can go visit. They have tours. It says, come see what all the buzz is about. And there are all sorts of projects, robotics and all of that. Here's another one. This is called Make It Labs. And this one is in New Hampshire. It's also called a hackerspace or community-operated workshop. So the names are a little tricky. It's hard to just Google and find them. But you can. And they're popping up all over the place. Here's another one. Lowell Makes, it's called. And this is a 501c. It's a nonprofit. It's a community workshop and lab. So all of these have the same focus. It's a place where you can go, you work with other people, they have projects. Sometimes you buy kits and you make it there. It's really amazing. Here's one. It says New Hampshire's only Maker Faire. Remember I said sometimes they're in very small towns, sometimes they're in big cities, but this is one. When you look at these links, you can sometimes find other ones. Okay, so that's part of the maker movement. A big part of the maker movement is about robotics. And I see it as two things, really. One is, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is another note about the, they call it intelligence everywhere, and part of that is smart machines, and part of smart machines are robots. So one part of robotics is using them. And right on the floor in the vendor area today, throughout the conference, was a Vigo robot. Did you see it wandering around? It's about this tall. That company has been doing pretty well. They're pretty expensive, but for a child who's home, who's temporarily or permanently not able to go to school, it's fantastic because they move around the classroom, there's a screen, people can see them and interact with them, and it's a really wonderful use of a robot. But you're not building the robot, you're using the robot. And there are an awful lot of robots. Here's a bunch of small ones. These were all focused on at the Consumer Electronics Show. And there was a report, there's a link to it earlier this month. And these are small, cute ones, inexpensive, fun for little kids that you program. But again, you're using the robot, you're not building it. Very different set of skills. Okay, so building them. Well, there's a whole movement. There are robot clubs at schools, after-school programs, community-based programs where kids get together and build robots, and sometimes they go to competitive events, and they have to build a robot that does a certain, it goes through an obstacle course, or it has to be built to throw a ball a certain distance, things like that. So there's real challenge, real problem solving, collaboration, and all of that. So that's one trend. This is one, if you click there, it's about one of those competitions in Texas. Okay? At the electronics show, I thought this was a nice article because it's about how robots engage kids, and fairly young kids. And again, sometimes the challenge is to move around, but you have to do something, either program the robot or have some kind of plan for it to move. First is a company, a group, and they're a nonprofit group. They're designed to inspire young people, particularly girls, to become science and technology leaders. And one of the things they did, this is a link to a YouTube about them, was they programmed a robot to be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade to cut the ribbon and shoot confetti to kick off the parade. So imagine being on national TV with the robot you built. Now Lego also has a bunch of kits, and they, again, this is not about using the robot as much as building them and programming them. And there are a whole bunch of different price points to get the Lego kits. There are also a bunch of less expensive robots that still involve a lot of problem solving, and they're very cute. I love the one at the bottom because it turns your smartphone into a cute little robot for $149. So there are a whole bunch of kits around. There are a whole bunch of ways that you can help kids build these. There are also some very, very inexpensive robots that you can make just from things like a toothbrush. If you go online and search for low-cost robots, there are a lot of little things you can do just with a few little tools and sensors, and get started that way. The next is 3D printers, and you've seen them probably build something layer by layer, and the keynote this morning was talking about a prosthetic limb and how the 3D printer created something that wasn't as painful and uncomfortable as before. 3D printing is another part of what Gartner talks about when he talks about the trends for 2015. And he believes they've gone mainstream, even though the price isn't quite as low as I'd like. Every conference I've been to lately has a crowd around the 3D printer booths. And some of them are very tiny booths in the back of the vendor area, but they're becoming more and more popular and people are interested. And that's just a picture of something you can build. I didn't build that. Even Google got a very large grant. Well, part of it was a grant, part of it is just Google money. They are trying to get more women into coding, and they're doing it with this program that helps them make these printable bracelets. So that's another trend. And I said that President Obama was very interested in the maker movement. He actually mentioned something in last year's State of the Union address about how some of these old warehouses are now becoming labs where people are using 3D printers to revolutionize the way we make almost everything. So that's Obama. 3D printing in schools. These are just a few articles that are pretty current and very interesting about how they could be used in classrooms. What is 3D printer? This is just a nice, it's a very nice place to go if you're a beginner and you want to learn about it. Learning by making. And I'm just going to go through this very quickly. These are some of the ones that are fairly inexpensive. PrinterBot, they're actually here at the show, at the vendor area. Affinia, some of the more popular is MakerBot. And I want to talk about the flipped classroom. I have 3 different areas here. We don't want your flip to flop. And one of them is TED. Now, you know about TED Talks, but there's also TED Ed. And I always like to show people this because I don't think people use it as much as they could. It's really amazing what they can do. They can take a lesson that any teacher sends in. They get a professional animator and they animate your lesson. And you can take a tour of the site. As of this morning, this is how many lessons have been created and how many questions have been answered. And there's a huge library, and this is what most people use. They don't send in their ideas. They use what other people have done. So there's a library. I would go there. And what's really interesting is that 2 of the people who've worked on this project are Melinda French Gates, you probably recognize that name, and Salman Khan from Khan Academy. So I was pretty impressed by that he's working on this. So they call it Lessons Worth Sharing. I'm not going to show you these videos, but these are 2 examples. I just don't want to take the time here. The Case of the Missing Fractals is this old-fashioned kind of mystery and it's about fractals. And this one is about isolated civilizations. It's kind of colorful and cute and very interesting. So they have it in math, science, everything. I want to talk about enhancing video because that's part of the flipped classroom. You can, this is just an article from Education World, Harnessing Online Video Clips. This is actually a movie at the Orlando Science Center. If you have time, it's fabulous. It's about how video can be used when you slow it down or speed it up or see what's within, how powerful a learning tool it is. Rushton Hurley is here at the conference, and I just love what he says. So this is to nextvista.org, another good resource. Vialogs, you can take any video and turn it into an interactive discussion forum. And Vialogs you have the video on one side, you have the discussion forum on the right. I'm just going to skip through here, but it's a really wonderful site. Popcorn Maker. Kind of a funny name, but you take any video and what you can do is like here, you take a TED video and you can superimpose your questions or a link to a map or a link to something about a country or whatever. So you can customize any video, which is a very powerful thing. EdPuzzle is another that helps you turn a video into your own lesson. Screencasting, you're probably familiar with this, but I always like to remind people that creating your own video is not as hard as it used to be. And there are a bunch of tools that are available, and you can capture whatever you're doing, your voice, and superimpose your picture and all sorts of things. Wearable technology. This is about headgear, and I just like that cartoon. I think it's great. And about why wearables are so popular right now. This is a little camera you can wear. But Sony is really challenging Google. And this is Sony's new wearable eyeglass attachment. It's called Attach. And if you read about it, you'll see this is very current. This was just introduced in January. If you read about it, you'll see that it's going to give Google a run for their money. But Google Glass you've heard of. I've tried it. It's a little disorienting. I always think I'm going to bump into things, but it's quite powerful. And it's been very slow, though, to really be available to the average person. It's still very expensive. And this talks about some privacy issues that people have, knowing that they could be videotaped anywhere. This is something about Google Glass and it being used in everyday life by teachers or anybody. 4 ways educators are using Google Glass in the classroom. Yes? You know, you're right. What? It's absolutely dead, huh? Well, forget that. But I think, what do you think about Sony's possibilities? Yeah, I think so. The Google Glass program, tell us. Project has just been stopped. It's been retired. Oh, well, maybe they'll sell them cheap now. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will update this before I share it with you, okay? Because you're right. Anyway, watches. At CES, they talked about this is the year of the wearables. There are a whole bunch of them. Apple Watch is the one that a lot of people are anticipating, but there are plenty others. There are articles about possibly using that kind of thing in a classroom, coming to a classroom near you. There are a whole bunch of fitness. I'm just going to go through this quickly. There are some wearables for very young kids, which is kind of fun. They have very limited functions, and some of them are just to track your kid to see where they are. And some of them allow the child to make just one call to their mother or somebody. That's all it does. Slice is a ring that allows you it's a ring that allows you to enter the MBTA stations in Boston. And it was started as a one of those funded projects. Pico or pocket projectors, very tiny, very powerful. Opaque projectors, that's what I used. They're being replaced. Hovercam is actually at the conference, and I have one over there. Very small, very powerful document cameras. Storage, getting very powerful and very small. And hard drives, the Lacy Mirror one, I urge you to look at. There's a best portable drives. These are just some little tiny thumb drives that I thought were cute. I don't use them much anymore. We don't really need to store things on drives anymore. Digital microscopes, they aren't just for science classes, and they can be hooked up to your computer and record video, and then that video can be used in presentations. There's one that can be attached to smartphones, just about any smartphone. Eye tracking and gaze interaction. This is fascinating, and this is wonderful for people who aren't able to interact with a computer any other way. They can do it with their eyes. And there's a whole academic program. Some of them are very expensive, but there are kits that you can get to bring the price down. And this is something that I just think is fun. Gapminder is a multi-dimensional graph. So you see the, I'm not going to play it for you right now, but every country has a color, a size, and you see these move over time to show you about 6 different kinds of data at the same time. And my Hall of Fame is, I still like the Library of Congress site and the Smithsonian site. They're fantastic. Your taxes are paying for these. You should take advantage of them. They have unbelievable amounts of resources. And QR codes, don't underestimate these. You can create these for free. A lot of people use them, but it's really easy to create them. And there are a whole bunch of uses for them in the classroom. The Wayback Machine, a lot of people have never heard about it. You can put in a website and find the history. Like you could find the Google icon. When Google first started, you can see it wasn't the typical look that it has now. And you can go back in time and see a CNN website from a presidential election 4 years before. But my last message really is that nothing replaces good teaching. That's the most important part of this. It doesn't matter what technology you use, you need to be good at your teaching. So thank you very much.
Thank you.